You are listening to Key to the Bridge, brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services, where we will be sharing human stories, talking about community resources, mental health, and wellness. This is a podcast for everyone. Welcome. Alrighty, well, welcome everybody to Key to the Bridge. Feeling pumped up about having my colleague and friend here again, because we'll see what happens. It's going to be great. We're here today with Larkin O'Leary, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about her organization in a second, but I just want to say thank you for coming back. And because, being on a podcast is what it is. But I really appreciate you coming back because I just appreciate our real talk. I think it's important that we keep having a real talk.
Agreed. About everything
that we're doing and experiencing. So I'm really happy to have you here. So tell folks who you are, what you're doing in the world.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Glad to be back. I am a executive director of Common Ground Society. So we do. Am I supposed to be looking anywhere particular? Or
nope.
Just at you?
You can look anywhere you want.
You can edit that out, right? Yes.
Nope.
Great.
Keep it. Keep it. We're keeping it all.
Okay, fine. Also that. So executive director of Common Ground Society, and I didn't mean to start a nonprofit. It was something that just happened out of a need for our community. So we do two things. We support our local disability community by doing various meetups. We have over 10 different touch points now. So we do family meetups, moms, dads, siblings groups. We have adults and teens speaker series where we teach teens and adults about different resources available for them, among other things. And we do hospital bags for families going in for surgeries or long hospital stays. We're currently beefing up our grief program, which is sad, but also awesome that we get to support families who are having to go through the unimaginable of losing their child with a disability. So we currently give grief baskets, and we're working on a program where we're going to work with other agencies to help support families when they're going through that. Mm-hmm. We lastly do presentations in the community about acceptance and inclusion. I believe our disability community will never be fully supported unless we all know how to support them. So that's
so you're
it.
not.
That's
you're just kind of hanging out.
I stay at home and I eat bonbons and watch the
you're not doing anything.
Soap operas all day. Yes,
that's okay. Whoa, when you said 10, I was like, it is 10. That's wow.
Yeah, at least.
Wow,
we keep adding.
Yeah,
when there's a need, we add, and that's kind of what's
been going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. That I have so many questions. I'm going to start with one. I think something that I've been lovingly and enjoying seeing in what's going on is, to your point, thinking about the caregivers and all of the adults that are involved in the process. And you know me, you and I I love my babies, all in on that. And the adult piece is, I think, a component that is so under discussed. I mean, parenthood in general, and then you're caring for people. And so I'd love to know some more about what you guys are doing for caregiving and just some trends that you're seeing with what's going on with the adults in your community.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our Facebook group is super active. We have probably 10, 15 posts a day. I mean, we have so many posts from people asking for support and understanding and even going in and being able to celebrate these wins, right? So my wins are very different from a typically developing win. I have a 10-year-old with Down syndrome. I have a 5-year-old neurotypical Tasmanian devil wild woman, but she's considered neurotypical, no disabilities. And so it's very different caring for the two. And we have noticed the upswing and need for support, particularly for our families who are dealing with both, intellectual, physical, dealing with school systems and medical systems, just feeling overwhelmed because although there is so much support out there, it's hard to find it. It's hard to know what resources there are. And that's what's been really cool about our group. People can lean on one another when they're going through a hard time. Us being able to offer those hospital bags and those grief support baskets. We also do an IEP study hall where we're helping our families to understand their IEPs I'm a big believer in collaboration. So we have Matrix Parent Support Network comes, as well as our Sonoma SELPA sends somebody and helps people to understand what their rules and their rights are in education, because it's so much.
It's so much.
Yeah.
It's so much. You don't always know exactly what you're agreeing to or
Right.
not agreeing to,
Right.
which is really complicated.
Right.
And wow, I'm thinking about the Facebook page. That's a lot of postings and requests. And do you think that when you say, I mean, they're overwhelmed, what are kind of the pieces of the overwhelm, if that question makes sense?
So, okay, so let's say James was born, right? And the social worker comes in and says, okay, Down syndrome, here's all the resources. And it's like this thick.
Yeah,
things
it's like
to do.
it's an encyclopedia.
What do I even actually need to do? And one thing that's special about what we're able to do, I recently was able to do this for a family who had a kid born with Down syndrome, actually, was just go, here's number one, just call North Bay Regional Center, get support from them. Just do that. And when you're done with that, let's talk about what the next step is. And I think it's hard because breaking it all down and understanding what is necessary and what's fluff, understanding what's real and what's our unconscious bias about parenting a child with a disability is hard. And our society doesn't help with that.
No.
I was just presenting to a behavioral company prior to this, because it was on my calendar.
I know.
Erica,
I know.
imagine that.
I know.
And we were talking about the fact that, like, what about those parents who are in disbelief? They don't believe that their child has some sort of diagnosis. Well, it's understandable. People don't want to believe that, because the way our society others people with disabilities and makes it seem like it's not like it's a beautiful natural part of our world. It's the only minority any one of us can fall into at any moment in time. Why is it that we don't support our families who have kids with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean the disbelief part is it's so complex to think about that, because to your point about grief, yes, losing a child, the unimaginable, and where and when that grief starts. I do think that's something about, like, raising children, regardless of what role you're in, pretty much, is the grief part that's like around most of the time while you're raising them, because you're usually kind of sad about something.
Yes. Yeah.
And or you're worried, which can then make you sad.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's not discussed if you do have a neurotypical child, let alone one with a disability, and, like, where is that even supposed to live? And you're trying also not to, like, put that on the kiddo.
Right. Yeah.
So you're holding it together. So that also must be some of the overwhelm too, is, like, you're also, like, have an audience.
Absolutely.
Your kids are looking at you and wanting to know, are things really okay? And if they're not okay, who's going to talk to me about it? And it's usually the caregivers. And so that sounds so challenging.
Well, and so I call them days of mourning. I still have days of mourning where I think about my life and I think about how different it might be should I not have had a child with a disability. I think about the different, the fact that, like, James would be in, like, Little League, playing baseball, playing soccer, doing all of these different things. Whereas right now, like, that's not where we're at with him. And so being able to have those days and those moments, and that's what's so special about our group, is that there's people that get it, that don't question whether or not, it's always like, believe me, I love my child with my entire heart and being, but this is how I'm feeling. In our group, you don't have to say that first.
No, you don't.
Everybody knows, know, and you don't know what you don't know until you know.
Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering, with the caregiving, in the systems that you're working in, I'm assuming the answer is no, but there isn't really support for caregivers. That doesn't really exist.
We're the support.
You're it. Okay.
I tried to get counseling after James was born. After James was unexpectedly born with Down syndrome, taken by ambulance to San Francisco immediately after birth, then found out he needed to have open heart surgery, then found out he had hearing loss, then found out he needed intestinal surgery, right? All these things happen, and I'm offered a therapy appointment once every 6 weeks, and I am given a different person every time. So I'm just reliving the trauma. Not only that, but I've also not able to work because I am in the hospital with him all the time. So now I'm paying out of pocket.
Because you don't have health insurance because you're not at work.
I did have health insurance, but what it covered was one session every 6 weeks, and this was prior to Zoom and stuff, so maybe things have changed.
No, really.
That was a joke.
Yeah,
that was not funny because it's sad.
No, it's so sad.
Now, just even like I'm going through a divorce or I'm divorced now and trying to get therapy for my daughter, who not only she's 5, she's going through a divorce and like the separation of her parents, the only thing she's known, but she's also the sibling of a child with a disability who does need extra. Yet the same thing applies for her. She can get therapy once every 6 weeks. I could do Zoom with her. I'm like, she's 5.
That's not going to work.
No. So it's sad that, and the other part of it, you think about like, when people are falling behind and you think about even like people with disabilities and getting them the supports they need, like it makes it harder later on, right? Like why are we not being proactive? And that's the part that's hard for me within all of our systems. It feels like we're reactive to everything. We know there was a pandemic. We know that there's trauma. Why are we waiting? Let's wait and see. Like that statement drives me a little crazy because like, why are we waiting and seeing when we know, anyways.
Well, it's not anyways. It's super important because I think that it's just interesting, like what gets focused on, I think is what you're talking about. And like, I just keep thinking to myself, which is really dark and sad, is that the history of having children with disabilities was like, they were supposed to go away.
Right. Not that long ago.
Yeah. And so there were lots of ideas around that, which it's mind-blowing to me. But I just think like if that idea of like them going away would then have meant like the caregivers would have like grieved, but then like we're kind of just supposed to go on with their lives like without their child. Right. Like that was the plan. Right. And so I do think like that's something that we're going to now have to really sift through is like that hasn't been the plan. I mean, for a while, that really hasn't. I mean, while is like 20 years probably, maybe 30. But now we know, to your point, like, okay, that's not the plan anymore. And some things, before the child gets here. Right. You know some stuff. Now sometimes we know some stuff. Not in your case, which is shocking every time you say it to me. But like if we know or you had some form of warning or prep, like like that you're going to have to deal with the adults who's going to have to care for the
Except
kiddo.
for the majority of the people who get diagnosed, at least with Down syndrome early on, get pressured into aborting their child. Yeah. Which is like, you can't look at a typically developing kid and tell me whether or not they're going to be a drug addict later, whether they're going to finish school, whether they're going to move out of their parents' house, especially now in Sonoma County. Like how many kids are still living, adult people are living with their parents, right? And so everybody has something beautiful to bring to this world, and it's sad that our community doesn't understand that people with disabilities are in that group of people.
And I think like as an adult moving into, if you have kids or are thinking about having kids, I just think about it's still just rooted in fear. Yes. There's no like, oh, like what is possible? Right. Just generally speaking. It's like I hope everything's normal. Right. And then that will be easier. Right. Right. Like that's like
parenting is just hard no matter how you look at it.
I mean, it's a wild ride.
As human beings, we are programmed to be scared of what we don't know, right? That's what keeps us out of danger in theory, but it's also what causes these bias and causes us to not make friends we might otherwise have, right? Yeah. And to not create a community of belonging where we really could, if we were just able to, create a connection and understand that all human beings are human beings.
Yeah. I mean, every time you say it, Larkin, I'm like, it just makes like really simple sense. And I just like wonder about where in the systems, I guess too, if we're talking about medical, maybe starting with medical, but where you all have either personal experience or noticing with the families you're serving, the complexity starts. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because I just think that well, I have my own opinions, but I just think in the medical system, like if they're not, well, maybe they're not even treating the family in the medical system. Like they're just looking at whatever's like, once again, like not normal or wrong and then just trying to fix it.
Right.
So do you think, I mean, literally you just gave a couple examples for you personally, but, and with like the families you're seeing, is that's got to be also part of the overwhelm, is that immediately their kid is just kind of a body that needs to be fixed.
Right.
I'm assuming. I'm making an assumption.
Well, and that's also part of the problem is we're thinking about people who are autistic need to be fixed, but really they're just people. Like they don't need to be fixed. We are all different. You have very different strengths and challenges than I do, right? We are all different humans. And just because I don't have like, I'm not wearing my label above my head, like it causes some sort of different like something in people. And, 20 years ago, people with Down syndrome like James may not have made it because they didn't do open heart surgery on people with Down syndrome. They didn't do X, Y, and Z, right? And so as our world grows in theory and evolves, we have a greater understanding. People with Down syndrome used to live till they were like, I'm making up this number. I'm going to say like 30 or something like that, or even younger because of those types of things. Now they're living to like 70 because we're offering that support. Right. And that's what confuses me is like there's data to show, just like inclusion in schools. There's data to show, right, that this is all beneficial for our entire community. And it is a community. We are as strong as our weakest members. Like, why are we not supporting all the people within our community?
And I think about as the caregiver, that's a level of advocacy that must be also really challenging to keep up.
Oh, man. Wow. Okay.
I mean, I waited a few minutes into the conversation because like that.
I am an educated white woman who knows my rules, who knows the laws, knows the rules, knows the things that are available for my son. And last week, I spent probably 4 days in tears on the phone and in emails all day, every day, trying to get my son what he needed and what services are available to him. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Friday, 5:30 at night, I'm finally on the phone with someone who's walking me through it and helping me through it. But it took all of that advocacy in order for me to get these services renewed and re-upped. And these are not even things that weren't here before. It was just something lapsed because my social worker was out and blah, blah, blah. It was like this big, long thing that like didn't need to be a thing. And if that's a struggle for me, imagine someone who doesn't speak English. Imagine someone who doesn't know how to read or doesn't understand the laws and rules. And it's so overwhelming. Yeah. And that is, again, what I think is so special about the group that we have is being able to lean on one another. When especially going through this divorce and understanding the rules and the laws and, of all the things, being able to lean into people who have been through it and who can give me the actual advice, because parents are the best support for parents, right? Yeah. Like we have agencies, that's great, but appreciate with all my heart these people who get into this work because they like supporting people, but you don't know you've not been there, and it's your job. And when people treat it like a job, it takes the understanding out, which is sort of what threw me into a tailspin last week of, well, I can't manage you and I can't manage you and do my job. And I'm like, okay, well, this is your job to manage.
Help me.
Our case, help me.
Yeah. I mean, and you have to keep it together. Yeah. Because you need something. Right. From these systems. Right. And so that power dynamic is also brutal because the phrase is real, but bite the hand that feeds you in a sense, right? That you can't absolutely, you might have full support, go completely off on this person because you're right. They're doing a job. They may be following the protocol, the blah, 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 whatever it is. And you need them. Right. And you have to just hold it.
That's my overwhelming personal problem is I am an uber empathetic person. And I understand that these people got into this role not because they want to keep something from me, not because they want to make life harder on me, and so I get that they're in that role, and I'm very good at being compassionate and understanding, but it gets to a point where it's I am not surviving right now. And like, your job is to help with that, and you're not helping. And I don't like, how do we fix this? So on one hand, like, I have a hard time, not being nice. But I think it in my head, and then I go home and I just cry, because it's like so overwhelming to try and do it all and keep it in.
Yeah, because you're right. There is also too, I mean, there's so many layers to that because it really depends on who is in that experience. Because you're right. If you don't speak English, or you're from a different minority group, or whatever it is, you're going to come up with the layered challenges as well. So I'm assuming with the caregivers too, there are like mental and physical health challenges too of the caregivers, because I'm assuming everybody's not doing super well all the time with managing everything.
Right. And it's a lot. I mean, you have to keep track of all of the appointments that you have for your kids. So James has a cardiac appointment he has to do every year. He has hearing appointments he has to do every year, and every 6 months he has a different set of health guidelines that he has to follow each year when we go in for his checkup, blood work, all of these different things. And I have ADHD, so trying to manage all of his stuff on top of like remembering to put my socks on in the morning, you know what I mean? Like, all of that together, like, if I don't get a calendar invite for something, I will forget.
You will forget.
You know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean.
It's just, I keep throwing that in there.
Well, no, because I mean, like, it's like, and the overwhelm, like the piece around, like, if you're managing multiple things.
Too much.
And you just miss a task or a deadline or whatever, and it's like, oh my God, I forgot.
Right.
Because I got distracted.
Right.
And it just didn't happen.
Right.
But the consequences, our consequences this morning were light and funny, but there's also like major consequences that could happen if you forget or miss something.
And that's what happened with me. I didn't know that my parent vendor number had expired, because normally my person helps me with that, but she was out. And so then I wasn't getting reimbursed for some things that I had been paying for. And, and I had just bought my husband out of the house. And so it was like this thing that was just like a circular ball of crap.
Yeah.
And it's just too much. And then you just give up. It's like, well, what's the point of any of it,
Yeah, because it shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be that hard. Yeah.
It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it is interesting. We were talking to some families actually yesterday because Medi-Cal changed, right? During COVID, Medi-Cal didn't require renewal. It kind of just rolled, right?
Yeah.
Most insurance was doing some of that kind of stuff. And so then in June of 2024, they started going back to like requesting renewals.
Yep.
And so we're running into multiple people who, I don't know how they maybe sent a letter. They're probably notified.
You get sent a letter. You get sent a packet. You have to fill it out. I have to let them know that James still has Down syndrome and hasn't gone away yet. So like, maybe next year. And then you have to return the packet saying, depending on what kind of Medi-Cal you're on. And for James, which this brings up now I'm like, oh shoot, do I need to do something with that, with his Lanterman Act, because we make more than enough to be able to qualify for Medi-Cal, but because of James's diagnosis and health issues, he qualifies for Medi-Cal. But you have to renew it every year, otherwise you lose it. And it's the same thing with just everything, which is just frustrating because like his Down syndrome isn't going away, friends. Like
the fact that you have to renew it is fascinating. And even what you're saying though, the process of the being notified, figuring out the steps and all of that. I guess I'm just lately been thinking about how the adults most places right now are like not necessarily all doing the greatest.
Right.
And the impact that has on children in general, but also too if you have any kiddo that needs whatever they need, and it's more than you have to give, what's the plan for that? Because we don't have consistent ways of people like laugh when sometimes a joke comes up about like that you're able to like leave your kid at a fire station if you are worried about their safety from you. And I'm like, no, that's a real law.
There's like really...
That's a real law.
And when you compound
that you can do that.
all of that behavior, you
Yeah.
compound all of that with behaviors.
Yeah.
So then the kids start feeling it, acting up. The kids are beating up their parents. The parents don't know how to respond, can't find help. Like it's a toxic cycle that of lack of support for our families and our caregivers who are just drowning in all of this.
I guess I'm wondering too, is there anything going on? Is there any like movements around like changing anything that's happening that's good? Probably not.
Not that I'm aware of.
There's like no.
No, I mean, I did hear, I heard that people are working on the mental health aspect, but, and being in leadership Santa Rosa, we went and learned about it, but, I don't see that in my day-to-day being true.
Being true. And then I'm also wondering too, you're talking about too being plugged into multiple systems. So I'm like thinking about your example about Medi-Cal for James. Who taught you about that? Like, how did you find out about that? Like, I think about those types of steps too.
I think the doctor maybe told us about it, but okay. I was, I bring home, we're in the NICU for 8 days, and then I was able to bring him home, but my baby who had like a broken heart, and it was like, just beef him up till he can have surgery, and we're hoping at 6 months, but then he didn't gain weight and he started vomiting, and so we ended up having the surgery at 3 months. And all the while I'm trying to figure out all of this stuff because we couldn't afford all of the surgery. He's like $1 million baby. Getting the supports he needs. But also you look at the impact he's had on the world, like it's been amazing and worth all of that. And, that again, I think is what is special about the group when people can go in and parents can say, I just had a X, Y, and Z, or is anybody familiar with, or what can I do here? And it's the parents that support one another. And that's why Common Ground Society exists, is to be that support, because you're not going to find it. You're not going to get all the answers anywhere else.
And even if they had them, they don't very good at sharing them, which is super huge.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how do you feel things are going like here in Sonoma County with our community here? Are we feeling like Common Ground Society, or just in general, like that there is some shifting that's happening? Because granted it's social media, but I do see that where you are and the places you guys are going and the conversations that you're having. How do you feel like it's going here locally? I mean,
this year our gala theme is belonging for the win, because there are so many shifts that have been taking place. Businesses, we started doing an inclusive spaces program where we go in and we talk about how to make something inclusive. And like the YMCA, for example, we presented to their board, to their staff, to their admin. They purchased Inclusive Spaces backpacks for every single one of their sites. They took out one of their rooms and they created a sensory room in there. They purchased adult-sized changing cots to put in their bathrooms so our families don't have to change their kids on disgusting bathroom floors, right? Like, so there is change that's happening. I mean, some days I come home and I'm just like, nothing's happening. What am I doing? This is all for nothing.
Yeah.
But then if I stop and look around, I mean, there's sensory-friendly hours at all of these different places now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to watch. Sonoma County Office of Education is offering universal design for learning training, and we're working with SCO and SELPA to help really help shift those mindsets. Different districts have been reaching out for the same thing. Hospitals and, as we learn about it, my statement is you don't know what you don't know until you know. Until you have that connection, you don't understand that there is something that's missing. I would have never known about someone needing an adult-sized changing cot because my kids have both been potty trained since they were, 2 and 3. So when you have a connection to it, then you see the real disparity and those little universal design things that not only in education, but just in our world in general. And I do see a shift. I'm starting to see a shift. I'd love to see more of a shift.
Yeah.
But it takes our entire community to be committed to belonging for everyone and creating a community of belonging.
Yeah, and I think you're up against too, just which you and I have talked about before. We have a lot of options and resources.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, at least for me, that's where sometimes a little bit of the frustration comes in, is that we could do this. Like,
Yeah.
we could actually do it. Like,
Yep.
it's not like in the future. It's like,
Right.
no, we could do it like
Right now.
now.
Yep.
And that part is always hard for me, because
Yeah.
I don't understand sometimes why we have to talk about it
Yeah.
so much. Like, why don't we just do it?
It's
like,
the reactive versus the proactive. And it's like, why do we just not, when we know the answer, we know it's going to help. Why does it take so long? Why does it have to be such a slow-moving ship?
Why?
I've got fuel. You got maps. Let's do this.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And so I do think that that's something that I'm hoping, in light of all of the uncertainty that's happening in the world, I do think there's going to be some things that are going to push people to, like, okay, no, we need to do that.
Yeah.
We need to go.
Yeah.
Like, it's time.
Yeah.
We like kind of, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that happens more here, because I do think too, when you're talking about belonging and like noticing, I do think there is visibility that's happening in a way in the community that was not, definitely. I mean,
Yes.
you and I have lived here our whole lives as kids. It was not, there was just no visibility.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
none. And even that we're getting to see it, or people asking questions, or
Right.
like thinking about that, like, that's definitely happening. And then our kids are getting gradually like different experiences,
Right.
than we got. I
Right.
mean, I never had anybody from an SDC class coming into my classroom
Right.
as a kid. Like,
Right.
that never happened. And now things are more integrated
Yeah.
in some different ways.
Yeah.
But I just think that will take some time, and you and I aren't into that. I want to do it like tomorrow.
Well, and it's like, you think about, so I just had James's conference sometime recently. And his teacher was talking about how great this class is, and how when James like tries to get distracted, even the students in the class will be like, burst working, like they know the sign to non-verbally communicate to him like what he needs to do, and how they help him, or how when he's having a hard time, like they know how to support him. It's not a thing. It's just
It's
James.
not a thing.
It's just because they've had him in his class since forever.
Yeah.
And so when I had a teacher once ask me, why is it that it's so important to you that he's included? Well, like, why is it important to you that your kid's included? Like, this kid is a kid. And once his classmates see him as just a kid, if we all treat him like just a kid, they're going to treat him like that.
Yeah.
And as those kids grow and they're the ones that are in charge, hopefully we've taught them well enough. We've shifted the disability curriculum from don't stare to don't stare, show you care, and how to do that. What a world it will be. Unfortunately, you and I will be dead because we're old.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have hope for like grandchildren, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
But and it's true. I think that we've, as adults in some ways too, like really like mucked it up in terms of what we think kids can and cannot do in their capacity.
And what they don't understand.
Yeah, to
Do you
care and
understand?
support
Yeah.
one another.
Yeah.
And I wish we leaned, or I hope we just continue to lean into that more, because it's not really confusing for them. They don't really see it that way. They just like to know kind of what's going on, or like how they can help, or maybe what's okay or not okay, but they don't see it that way.
We're the adults that mess it up.
Yeah, 100%.
If the adults are the problem.
100%.
Our world is based on the convenience of adults, not what's best for our community or what's best for our kids.
Yeah, I think about it all the time, because you're right. I think about students in class. I even think about being in school as an adult and having peers and being like how we supported each other. Like, you knew when somebody needed a redirect, or they needed to take a break, or whatever. Like, we were just helping each other. Or, hey, no, so-and-so's sleeping.
Yes.
They're, you know what I mean? Like, they got dropped off really early because of X, Y, and Z. Like, there's all sorts of things we did for each other.
Right.
And it wasn't that complicated.
Right.
I just wonder, too, why there's such a worry about that. I've always just wondered, like, to your point, like, why, what do you mean? Why would I want my kid included?
Right. Like,
what do you mean?
It's because, again, as humans, we're scared of what we don't know, what we don't understand. And so when a kid like James comes into your class and he doesn't communicate the same way we do, he doesn't always behave the same way we do, he doesn't regulate his body the same way you and I do, he doesn't learn at the exact same way you and I do, it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
And I get that. And that's what's been amazing about having my son at the school he's at, is we're able to have those open, honest communication conversations. But But as a society, we have to move past that. We have to push past those feelings of discomfort and fear and create a connection, because otherwise we're never, ever going to make progress.
Yeah, I don't, and that just seems so, well, right now things seem a little weird, but I just feel like locally I'm hoping we continue to do what it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I also think like we're moving into this time of year in winter.
Yes.
You know, in wintertime where, I don't know, we're supposed to, we were talking about this earlier this morning, winter is about like coming together and snuggling up with your communities.
Yes.
And my favorite part, eating a lot of carbohydrates.
Yes.
So into it.
Here for it.
Yeah, just all of them.
Yep. Everyone.
So all of them, all the kinds. You know, all of that is like on purpose. But I've been thinking about families that maybe once again, like feel like they don't fit.
Yeah.
In that community gathering. And so I'm wondering too, like, are there things we could be considering and how we're supporting the families in things to consider, like that, you know, they're just
asking.
like not on the radar.
Yep.
Like I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, it's thank you for asking. It's such a great question to ask, because as someone who has a child who he doesn't eat solid foods. He is not motivated. He's not food motivated. So even Halloween, for the longest time, it was like he just was like didn't care. Where every other kid was like, "Oh my goodness," he was like, "Meh." And he has hypotonia, so walking around, his muscles are tired all the time. So it was not something he was excited about. Which again goes back to those days of mourning of what I think my parenthood is going to look like.
Right.
So when we go to family outings, like let's say we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
I have to talk to my parents about like, we need to have it earlier because later causes more behaviors. You know, we need to be accepting that he's on his iPad, not because I believe in technology, because I don't. I'll tell you, like James did not go on his iPad until he was 3.5, and he was in the hospital hundreds of days, and we did books and we communicated with him. But like now, thinking about the iPad, for example, people look at that and are like, oh, just parent. Oh, so your iPad's parenting your child. Well, the iPad is predictable for James. He can talk to it like a friend and he knows what it's going to say back. He can watch the same videos over and over again and he knows what to expect, and he can interact with it in a different way than when I'm watching, you know, my shows. I just sit there and eat the carbs and watch the shows. Whereas it is like, it's calming to him to have something that he understands. And so when you're out in the world and you see a kid with an iPad, you know, first of all, like the judging, we need to like work on that. But also asking families, hey, I know Tommy has a hard time with loud sounds, or he had a hard time last year at Christmas. Is there something I can do to support you because we really want you to be here, and we understand if you have to leave. I mean, we didn't make it through Christmas Eve dinner 2 years ago. I left halfway through because James was just having a hard time. And I was leaving. As I was leaving, I'm crying. He's crying. We're all crying. Everybody's crying. It's a lot of tears. But it was what was necessary for my kid. And had my family not been supportive of me, that would have been extra super hard. Yeah. But they get it. And so I think really asking the families what accommodations, what supports, and then just understanding if they can't make it, or if they say they're coming and then they end up not coming after all, you don't know what happened at home. Maybe the kid had a hard time. Maybe the kid had a meltdown. Maybe the mom had a meltdown. You don't know what you don't know. And so just presuming positive intent and offering your support. Yeah,
I think that we don't do that for all families with small children. And I also think that we don't even, and then worse kind of in some ways, we don't even think to include. We make assumptions that they wouldn't want to come. Right. Or that they wouldn't want to, like that James wouldn't want to be at least invited to trick-or-treating.
Yep.
Maybe James wants to hand out candy. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's great. You know, like but I just think we don't take that next step in asking. Because once again, I think people are worried about being uncomfortable. Right. But I do think anytime anybody has asked me to be included or wondering and have a question, like that felt so much better than being excluded.
Absolutely. Because, you know, we live in the day of social media. I'm going to see it. And if I wasn't invited to the party because you thought James wouldn't whatever, like that, even when we were going through all the medical stuff, you know, someone was like, well, we didn't think that, you know, and it's like, let me make that choice. Yep. Let me make the choice. Yeah. If you want to be my friend, like, here are the guidelines. Just kidding. But like, if you want to be my friend, like understand that that is hurtful to not be invited. If you're trying to save my feelings, I will save my own feelings. Invite me.
And I also think too is like I think we don't think about all the things. We don't think about sensory. We don't think about food. We don't think about germs. We don't think about just communicating, like how people could communicate with each other in different ways. And back to your point about universal like learning, right? It's also too just like universal communing together that I think that we need to get better at that, you know, and being aware of the people who are having to do the prep to get to the thing. Right. So you're saying, okay, James doesn't eat any solid foods or whatever. Like I think about, okay, well, what are some ways that I could help you?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like is there some non-solid foods that we can prepare that James can eat? That, I mean, you know, things like that.
The most impactful moment, well, I mean, there's been many, but one of the most impactful moments since I've had James was when I went over to my friend's house with the kids, and she offered popsicles to the kids, and James obviously didn't have one, and I could tell she felt bad about it. She didn't have anything he could have, and so we go home, and I had to go home because he ran out of food, and the next day I get a text from her with a picture of food pouchies, and it said, "I will always have something for James to eat at my house." And like that little gesture meant more to me than anyone could ever understand. How many places I've had to leave, like, because I don't have enough food for James, or he's a 10-year-old boy, like making enough pureed foods for a 10-year-old boy. Just imagine.
Yeah. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to help you with that. Cause he's just going to eat more food.
You got to figure out how to make him make his own food. Yeah. The irony that he hates the sound of the blender and yells at me the entire time I'm blending his food is like,
we might need to get you some ear covers, and you're going to have to learn how to work that blender.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's like
huge.
Those little things that just mean so much to everyone.
Yeah, you said, and I was just, all of it. Like, because there's all the holidays and all the things, and how do we make sure that people feel welcome is going to be
like, do you want to come over maybe 20 minutes earlier so he can acclimate? You know, if he needs a safe space to go, here's a bedroom he can go in that's quiet, that he can go calm himself and watch his iPad. You know, like just allowing and for that space, holding space for your families, and maybe coming up with some of those ideas to say to your families and friends, I think would be really impactful.
Really impactful. And then I wonder too, for the kiddos, are there some things that are going on in the community that are more inclusive? Do you know? I mean, you might not know off the top of your head. I just keep wondering too, like, are we building more community events where people can be included? Yeah,
like, so we have our Christmas meetup that we're doing where Santa's coming. We have a meetup, the family meetup this weekend for our families to get their family photos taken, because, you know, that is, you know, they're so expensive, number one. Number two, you don't even know if your kid's going to participate. So super special. And then we have our meetup with Santa. We're going to have a noon Year's Day party. More to come on where and when that will be this year. But those are kind of the big things that are around here for our families. But again, just inviting people, like the Rose Parade this last year, in Leadership Santa Rosa, I was with one of the chair people, and he reached out to say, how can we make sure everyone can come? And they bought us all the stuff to have a table with a canvas, pop-up tent that had sides on it, and our families were able to come and not only use an adult-sized changing cot that they purchased that we put in there, but also all the fidgets and the different things that we have available were in there. One girl came and said, and brought her mom back afterwards and said, "Mom, look, it's the screaming tent where I can go let out all my emotions, and then I can go back and enjoy the fair," or whatever was happening. And then another kid came with his dad, and the dad said, the our AmeriCorps member was explaining all the different tools, and he said, "Oh my goodness, this would be great." And he was talking about TheraBands, how we can tie them to chairs and kids can use them as a fidget. And he said, "This would be great. You have anxiety. This would be great for you to bring to your class and put on your chair. So when you're having anxiety, you can like move your body without having to get up and move around." And he was like, "Dad, that's a great idea." So even just learning about the resources for kids who aren't technically disabled or don't identify as disabled, creating those spaces. So there are people that are reaching out to try and make it more inclusive, which has been really great. But we still got a lot to go, a lot of space to go for that. I mean, the Snoopy's Ice Arena, we've had 2 ice skating events there, which have been amazing. They bought an adult size changing cot for us. They donate the space for us to come and enjoy ice skating. And they give us the little things that you can put on your shoes. So like James, who I never thought would be out on the ice, was walking around with these little shoe things because he wouldn't put on skates. And as a family, we're able to enjoy that together, something I never thought we'd be able to do.
Yeah, I just think all of that is so, I mean, it's always so important, but I just think now it's like, if we know, what is it going to look like?
Yeah.
And I'm excited to be moving in the direction of that conversation.
Same.
Like, okay, like, what is it going to look like? Okay, how are we going to try? But I do think it's one of those things where we get super caught up this time of year in the way things look. And like the way things, I don't know, the expectations around like the way things are supposed to go.
Right.
And there's so much stress in that.
Yeah.
And I just hope that, we're working to make sure that the adults.
Yeah.
Oh, the adults.
Those adults.
That we're working on holding more space for like what are some different ways that things can go, or being just flexible.
Just being flexible. I mean, the first 3 years you think are going to be these magical years with your kid, opening up their stocking and can't wait, even like Tooth Fairy, all the things, right?
Yeah.
Well, James, like the Tooth Fairy comes and he's like, man, like doesn't care, right? And I'm like, cool, glad I like went to the bank and got cash.
Yeah.
But like, or like Christmas, you expect him to come out and all the presents are under the tree, and all he wants to do is go play with his balls. He doesn't care about the new things.
Yeah.
And so it's like that. It's sort of a letdown on your expectations of what parenthood should be. And as hard as much as I've noticed that is a pattern with me, and that my expectations, I need to like work on managing my expectations and realizing that those are my sources of letdown. It's, again, those days of mourning. And, like, if I can't come over Christmas morning like I'm supposed to because I'm having a hard time accepting what's happening right now, like, hold space for that. And maybe you come to them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe your friend is having a really hard time. Maybe you just go to the grocery store, because they're going to not say they need help. I have the hardest time asking for help. I help everyone, but I can't. It's just too hard for me. But sometimes I could use someone just bringing me the stuff I need to make James's food. How much easier that would be if I just had it at my house instead of me having to go to Costco and picking it up, when I'm having a hard time.
Yeah.
It's just going to the grocery store, getting some food, getting whatever.
Yeah.
Don't think about it for tonight.
Yeah.
And just
do it. Yeah. I think too, we get caught up in, what's the word? Like, I don't know, like the etiquette of how we're supposed to do something.
Right.
And gesture for people. Like, oh, I don't want to offend them. And I'm like, well, most of the time people are not going to be offended.
Leave a pizza on my doorstep, I would not be offended.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I just think like that's something we also have to work on. Is most of the time people are, and if they are flustered or overwhelmed or whatever, it's not usually at you.
Right.
It's like at the situation of what's going on. And I think we need to blow past some of all of that. And I don't necessarily think social media connecting all the time is the best way to do that.
Right.
But I do think we need to get better at just like being neighborly.
Agreed.
Like, and that's super important. Yeah. Or a text that says, how can I help versus how are you doing? And
I don't even know, but here's the thing, is people don't even know how you can help them. Mm-hmm. The way that you can help them, I appreciated more than anything, more than me having to come up with a way for you to help me, was for you to help me in a way that I didn't understand. Mm-hmm. But also, if you don't know what to do, Many of the time I would text our families who are in the hospital or our families going through it and just say, I just want you to know you're being thought of. You do not need to respond to this text message. I'm going to keep checking in, but know that I'm thinking of you. And that little gesture in knowing that there's nothing I need to do, because when you say, how can I help you? Then it puts a burden on me to like figure it out. And not that that's not a great thing to do, but the majority, I would say 80% of the time, let me know if you need anything means I'm never going to hear from that person again. Right? Because I'm not going to let them know that I need something. It's that proactive versus reactive again. Because
it's so, I don't, the level of management and sometimes isolation and I give you the word managing. Yeah. Like you're just managing so many things. Yep. The other thing you said that I want to touch on is siblings. Mm-hmm. And I also think that is something that does not get addressed or wondering about at all, because it just doesn't.
It doesn't.
And that's also, too, a group that we're going to need to, like, support in a particular way in some ways, because, I mean, I'm just thinking about all of the siblings I know that I don't think they got anything.
Yeah. And you think about seeing the behaviors of the aggressive behaviors. You see about the lack, the differences in what they get versus what they get, or all of the time after. I mean, I was trying to find a time for June Bell to go to gymnastics. And I was like, well, James's schedule is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like, he has therapy all those days. So I'm like, but there's no time. Like, where's the time for June Bell? So I've had to be very cognizant of like making sure that there is time and setting aside time. Allowing siblings, that's what's great about our sibling group, is they have a place where they can find someone like them, because their friends aren't doing the same things that they're doing. No. Probably. And so to have somebody, we have these two boys who have been in our sibling group since the beginning, and now they're like the best of friends. And it's so cool to watch them do things. And then at our family meetups, they have a friend there. And so, but offering that support, our tagline in our household is everyone gets what they need, not everyone gets the same. And so June Bell likes to change it to everyone gets what they want, but I try and tell her, like, you're wrong. And she doesn't listen because she's the boss of me, let's be honest. And I just throw it out of the world. I know she's the boss.
She's the boss.
It's fine.
She's the boss.
But her deeper understanding of all of that comes just with that lifelong learning, and then having that support of people who get it. Yeah. I mean, she's going to develop into something that you and I could never be, right? Because she's lived through this life, this different type of life, not a bad, no bad, just different. Yep. And has a different understanding of the way the world works.
Yep. Yeah, I just think that's a group of people too we like need to tap into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that is also a group that used to kind of have to hide what was going on in their family or what was happening for them. And they're really amazing, powerful people that should also be part of the conversations that we're having. Because they do. They kind of have a special power of being able to see things in a different way and so connected. Like, talk about, that baby girl, you better look out because she's... Woo!
I thought the hardest part of parenting was going to be all the hospital stays with James.
No.
Turns out it's not.
No.
Turns out it's parenting June Bell.
Yeah,
Love that child. But here's the thing. How do you parent a child like that without dulling the sparkle? Because there is she is perfect just as she is. Yeah. Sometimes it drives me a little
your eye's going to twitch a
little bit. Yeah. But that drive and that force, that's what's going to get her through life. I mean, she is an amazing, brilliant, lovely, kind, empathetic human. How do you contain that?
Nope. It's like I know.
It's like this interesting.
I got two kids too that are 2 out of the 4. They're like a wall of loving fire. Yeah. And I'm like,
that's it.
Okay.
A wall of loving fire. That is so.
I'm just like,
a great way to describe it.
I don't know, get out of the way. Yeah. Like I gotta just have to
sometimes
see what happens.
Yeah.
But and it's super important. And I just think that being able to talk about the different people who are involved in what's happening, those other people don't get discussed or addressed. And like, that's something we're going to continue to work on. But I also think too, it makes connection different, because I don't think sometimes people are like, oh, do I know somebody with a disability? And like, they might not be able to name a person in particular, but they don't know necessarily, because there's also all these other people that are connected to those folks. And so I do think we need to get better at like being inclusive in a lot of different ways, of just even asking about how people's families are, what their connections are, what they've got going on, because all of us have some connection to something.
Well, and you think about all the people who mask all day long, their disability. I mean, like, I run a nonprofit, and I like have ADHD, and trying to organize my thoughts in a way that makes sense, even when I'm presenting. And I've done a TED Talk. Like, I'm a good presenter, but there are times when I've got other things going on in my mind, and it's like trying to get the words out of my mouth. It's challenging, overwhelming, and exhausting to mask that all day. Then I get home, and so it's just understanding that we are all different, and that's what makes our world a beautiful place. And how do we tap into those strengths that we all have? We all have some sort of strength. I mean, James walks in here right now. He will make you, so you be grumpy, it doesn't matter. No. He will make you smile. He will tell a joke. He will sing Taylor Swift, Lord Help Me.
Which song is he on right now? Which one?
His You Need to Calm Down is his new one.
Well, it's a good song.
Well, he sings it at the top of his lungs at 6 a.m.
Well, I mean, you might need to calm down.
I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. However, my eardrums, I am sensory sensitive sometimes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's a good song. That's a really good song. I mean, I just think I hope that we are going to continue in like seeing just the power of all of the people. Yeah. But Larkin, I want to be clear. What you're talking about in your organization and you just as a being is, you're right, an area that we're going to need to get way more aware of, because we also have just multiple different age groups and different members of our community that are all a part of this, but we're not talking about it.
Well, and like trauma affects it all too. Yeah. So, and like, we've all been through the fires and the floods and the pandemic. Like, people are being misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, re-diagnose, whatever. Like, but what it comes down to is us treating each person as a person, meeting them where they're at, and scaffolding up. Period. End of story for everything.
Mic drop. It's a good way to whoop. I don't know what else to say to that other than that's
there you go.
End of story.
Okay.
Period. No, that's so. I appreciate every time you come, because I just think we gotta keep on talking. Because
love it.
I mean, our children definitely are descendants of some version of Walls of Fire between me and you too. So
don't know where that came from.
No, look
Weird.
out. But thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thank you for having me.
All right. You've been listening to Key to the Bridge, a podcast brought to you by your friends at Keystone Therapy and Training Services. I'm your host, Erica Bosque. Key to the Bridge is recorded and produced by Jeff Henderson and Brian Henderson. This is a podcast for everyone.